with the last slide for fun, really. Um, Basically, I think my introduction comes through what I'll say. Can you all hear me all right?
Yes.
And can you see my screen all right? Yeah, that's great. Okay. In fact, what I'll do is I'll stop sharing for a moment, just get me onto the last slide. And then because I think that will, as it's a business conversation, that will be most helpful. Right. So if I share screen now. You can see my last slide here. It's only going to start at the end, never mind. Let's whiz through. And you can see, it's gone back, never mind, we're there. What I did about, I had quite a formative time 8 years ago when I had a little brush of breast cancer. And so I did an overview of my life. And you might like to do something like this yourself. So I put the decades across the middle, as you can see, and then the things which were fixed were in the boxes above and below. So where I learned and worked is above the dates, where I lived, and special events or holidays. And then above that line, I put in green all the things that had been wonderful experiences in my life, highlights, if you like. And below the line, at the bottom and below the boxes, I put all the things that were painful, difficult, challenging. And then I put verses in the clouds, which had been important to me at the time, or which through the process of reflection, I found really helpful. And it was a most revelatory experience for me because I discovered how many positive things there were above the line and how few negative things there were. I also found that quite often the negative and the positive were in juxtaposition. And so, for example, when I had the brush with cancer, I felt very deeply loved. I felt very much the presence of God. I was not afraid. So you get the idea of what I mean. So I'm not going to go into that in any more detail. Suffice to say that I found it a very useful exercise, and I plan to do it again 8 years on, and hope that is of enjoyment to you. So we'll go now on to the slide. So my name's Felicity Gunn, and I've entitled each of the sections, or at least I did call it Sliding Doors to Retirement. Or beyond retirement as well. And I've named each of my sections after a film. So my first part, 12 years a lawyer instead of 12 years a slave. Maybe I was a slave. With some visits to Uganda. My second was 27 years as a teacher. And I found that my key thing there was to try and help children to ask good questions. So they were the great debaters. And then the third part was Pilgrim's Progress. And the last part, I'll give you some lessons that I've learned. So now I can, if I minimize myself, is that better? Then you've got the thing. So what I thought was I had written this quite formally, and though I've done quite a lot of public speaking, I'm not very confident about doing it without notes. So because we're such a small number, please don't hesitate to chat, ask me a question or whatever as we go along, because I'm in a sense, the way I've done it is quite a chatty way. And I'm thrilled to have been asked to speak to you. Alan asked me after I'd given this talk at CBL in the Oxford and Whitney group. So I hope my story is interspersed with verses and thoughts which may be of encouragement and to you. So my first section then is about the 12 years a lawyer. I thought I wanted to be a European lawyer, and that's why I went to Exeter, which was the first university in the UK to have a European law library and European law professor. When I went to Exeter, I was painfully thin. I was prompted by the vice president of the CU to read the Bible privately. And one night in my third year, God revealed himself to me through 1 Corinthians 6:19, which is shown there in the green at the top. Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you've received from God? You're not your own. You were bought at a price. Therefore, honor God with your body. How kind of the Lord to bring this verse to me, to honor my body as a temple for the Holy Spirit. So anorexia no longer framed my life. Well, the Lord led me in 1982 after law school in Guildford and articles in London. So this is where I did my articles in Bedford Square, which was wonderful.
Nice.
And I then was a solicitor in a large firm as a property expert. So during this time, a colleague and I ran an alpha group in the office. And we had 8 colleagues become Christians. I burned to be a missionary, but my vicar at St Helens, I expect you possibly know the name of Dick Lucas, St Helens Bishopsgate, said he could only see a yellow light. He coveted my presence in the city as a missionary to colleagues, but he would pray like mad if I really thought I should leave the law. Well, we know the power of prayer, and his prayers must have been answered, at least for a few more years. Well, I'm very, very grateful for the 5 years I spent at St Helens, and I developed some deep disciplines of Bible study and prayer, which were extremely helpful to me. This big firm was an excellent business with very interesting work, very well organised. So the firm didn't have people working on the business, but people working in the business. This is a phrase that perhaps some of you have heard from Andrew Cussons, who has been my business coach. Everybody knew their role and the procedures. I was privileged to look after 2 large agricultural estates and had a wide range of private clients and commercial property work. At the end of 4 years in 1986, in my performance appraisal, my supervising partner, Peter, said that I could stay as long as I liked. He thought I should look for a role in a provincial firm where I could be a partner. This was sound advice, but I was furious. I'm not sure where the Lord was at this point. He allowed me to do what I wanted. I mention this because I feel performance appraisal is a difficult area. And you may have people who are your employees. And I think it's an area where we can really offer a great deal, but people are not always receptive. So, of course, we're accountable to God and he will judge us, but those in authority at work or even in church also have to hold us to account and make judgments about how we're getting on. My sense is that if there's a very good working relationship between employer and employee, that the process of appraisal can be very constructive, even if difficult things have to be said. I suspect that Peter had read the 1 Minute Manager. I very much enjoyed working for him and had not recognised that his advice fitted with the wider plan of the practice. Well, about the same time, 1986, I started to attend St Michael's, Chester Square. My vicar there, I don't know if you know David Pryor, was interested in my call to be a missionary and suggested I go to Uganda in a team of 12 for a 2-week mission around the Diocese of Jinja. It was excellent. Africa got in the blood. When I got back in November 1986, I joined a new commercial practice where my ambitions could be realised. It was a new, small practice with only 6 partners, and I thought it'd be very interesting to work with people from different cultures and faiths. We had Indian, South African Orthodox and Reformed Jews and a Muslim. To have a token woman with a sort of establishment background was exciting news for them, and I was made a partner within the year. I was given permission effectively to build my own practice without reference to anyone else. There was no shared vision. Neither was there any shared management structures or processes, quite the opposite from the previous firm. There were not many Christian lawyers about, so when I went around the big churches in London with my visiting card, the clergy were delighted to know about me and passed on my contact details. I introduced over 100 clients to the firm in a year. After a weekend in prayer, I gave the senior partner a structural plan of the practice. He was delighted, and it was in place within 3 months. I trained an excellent secretary and was getting so much done that they gave me a second secretary. I trained a blind article clerk, having worked with an excellent blind solicitor when I was in articles. The firm expanded, and my fee income was 8th out of 22 fee earners. I was the blue-eyed girl and a success. On reflection, the Lord clearly allowed me, perhaps even enabled me, to work in this practice, to do very good work and to be a witness. But I was asked by another partner if I would take £250,000 in a suit case to Manchester. I naively refused, saying we should surely use telegraphic transfer. But I'm sure this request was a ruse to see if I would be involved in their fraudulent activity. Overnight, the atmosphere changed. I was sent to Coventry. I wasn't invited to partners' meetings or given copies of the minutes. Over a weekend, all the files of work that I'd not introduced were removed from my filing cabinet. I was given some very onerous deals with difficult clients to deal with and short deadlines, so I was working late into the night. I lost a stone in about 6 weeks. My vicar said we should pray about my future. A few weeks later, I was invited by him to come to a meeting on the 9th of December 1988. There were 7 or so young people who were going to Uganda in January, and they needed some cultural orientation. So I duly went to the vicarage. The Ugandan came to the house, whom no one had met, to join in the cultural orientation, and in the coffee break came up to me to ask if I knew a lawyer who could come to Uganda and help set up a law centre. He was a lawyer who went on to work in the Ministry of Justice. This was my personal invitation, God's rescue plan. I learned afterwards that the partner who had asked me to take the money to Manchester in a suitcase went to prison for 8 years for a £66 million mortgage fraud, and the firm folded. I was never picked up by the fraud squad or the Law Society. So here I was in 1989 going to Uganda in January, and that's where a great deal of healing took place. The culture shock was significant, but the reverse culture shock was even greater when I came back. I'm happy to answer questions about culture shock at the end. We were teaching at 8 schools each week and doing missions with Scripture Union to FE colleges around the country and leading the Sunday school of 300 little people at Namirembe Cathedral. So there you can see Namirembe Cathedral. It's a fantastic place. And in fact, the design of it was the runner-up in the competition for Liverpool Cathedral. And I expect you may have seen pictures of the Liverpool Cathedral Anglican, which is also red brick, rather more square. But I think this suits Uganda very well. I gave a Bible reading on the hospital radio in Mengo, which is a CMS hospital, each Wednesday evening. I lived with another girl and a couple of boys at the home of the Bishop of Namirembe, and you can see him in this picture in the middle, who was a true evangelist. He looked to the Lord, he was radiant, his face was never ashamed. He would be up at 4 a.m. to pray, welcoming guests from 7 a.m., then out visiting, doing baptisms, confirmations and ordinations, going around schools, hospitals and slums where people were dying in their hundreds from HIV/AIDS. And we were incredibly blessed to go with him. At 9:30 each evening, the household of 20 would gather for prayer in the large sitting room. Most nights we sang What a Friend We Have in Jesus, or Nothing is Impossible to God. Africa's different. Relationships are paramount. Generous hospitality is given even by the poorest. Perhaps there were half a dozen meals over the 6 months when we didn't have visitors. As they said, the English have watches, but the Africans have time. No one had diaries or mobile phones or computers. Guests would turn up. There was always food, a listening ear and prayer. I mention this at some length as it deeply affected me, and it shaped the way I related to children in the classroom, colleagues, family, friends, and now clients in my business. Sometimes timekeeping has been an issue for me, but I've wanted to know everyone to know that if they're with me, they have my undivided attention and care. This seemed to be the way Jesus related to people as he walked around Galilee. I returned to London to start my fourth job. Before I'd gone to Uganda, one of the partners had read a paper I'd written on shared ownership housing, which he thought was rather good. Lucky for me. So we met and he agreed to take me on when I returned. I had a great time for 3 years. Being a partner was no longer an issue. I just had to work out how to be a missionary. I don't know if you remember, but in 1992, there was a financial crisis and the bottom dropped out of the property market. I was made redundant on the 9th of March, 1992, but able to continue working until August. It was also the 9th of March I completed the sale of my house. How amazing that I was, so to speak, to be stripped so I could be free to teach. The Lord in his mercy found me a place for teacher training in Cambridge, but the placement was made at the 11th hour in my last week at this firm of solicitors. So the next 27 years, the Great Debaters, I was an RS teacher, religious studies, teaching in 4 schools, 2 state and 2 independent. You had to have a business mindset in a fee-paying school, and I gave from my experience what I could to the schools, talking about management structures, marketing and human resources issues. I loved being a teacher, particularly of the Gospels, philosophy and ethics, and I was a missionary, but to my own people. I realised that Uganda was so Christianised and our young people had little knowledge of Jesus. So I asked the Lord to place me in each school where I worked. My chief objective was to present religious ideas to teach children how to think and write in an articulate and well-structured way. They became great debaters. I wanted openness and great mutual respect. Children may not have become Christians there and then, but they've come back to me since to say how they came to faith and how I'd started them on that journey. Well, the last 2 years, Pilgrim's Progress. 2 years ago, the Lord led me to retire from teaching. I was 60, but not able to take my state pension for another 6 years. I also wanted my teacher's pension to accumulate for longer. Clearly, I'd need some income. My initial thought was to do some tutoring. However, on a wonderful walk with some great friends from Exeter, I was encouraged by one, Mark, to find out about a small education consultancy in London where his niece worked. It was impressive and offered a range of services to parents in London. I thought I should sign up as one of their tutors, but he said, no, set up something like this consultancy to serve Oxfordshire. I have to confess, this seemed exciting and realistic, and I felt like a call from God. My journey had been a call. I will draw a parallel with Abraham, who God called from Ur to Haran. Then, because he got stuck in Haran, he was called again from Haran to the promised land. Abraham was obedient in making the journey. He didn't know anything about his destination. He was aware of there being one God who was living and active, who communicated with him and led him. He had to be open to be guided each step of the way. I could see more parallels for myself to make the journey to take steps in faith, not knowing where the parents would come from or what I would need to do to support them. I certainly do not have a clear idea of where the business is going or where it will end up. However, I have been aware of God's presence and leading at each step of the journey. Well, setting up a business is a great undertaking. I felt the Lord gave me the name Paths to Learning because I'm not only looking at finding schools, but finding different ways of learning for children, but acting for their parents. It required so much planning, structure, expense and advice, much more than I realised. I had much to learn and many connections to make. So this list, I think, will be very familiar to you. I went to breakfasts with BNI and B4, and I found some great local professional advisors. My brother James has been a trusted and wise counsellor, and he recommended the CRM app, Dubsado, which I endorse wholeheartedly. Other professional advisors seemed to cross my path at just the right time, so I thank the Lord very much for his provision. I visited schools, attended education conferences, stood outside the dining rooms with my banner over lunches at the Science Park in Oxford, Milton Park and Harwell campus. I joined the Society of Education Consultants, you can see their logo here, and also COBIS, which is the Council of British International Schools, the Tutors Association, and LinkedIn. Having saved quite a bit of money in my last couple of years at school, I was able to live on and use savings. So what was my first USP? This is to help parents find the best school or learning support for children in the UK. You can see there at the bottom, this is the front page of my website, that I'm looking to help international people who are not living in the UK, so they'd be sending their children to boarding school. International people who are moving to the UK, and I've served quite a number of people who've used state schools, and expats exactly the same, sending their children home. Maybe children need learning support, and I've helped quite a number of families who've got children with autism or some sort of physical need, blind, and I've also even had one poor youngster who was expelled, and children whose education has been interrupted by sickness. So if you know anybody, let me know. So my second USP emerged in conjunction with Plumtree's consulting to help young people to discover their superpowers. This consultancy was set up by a Christian with an interest in psychology to help people with their careers and to advise on team effectiveness. I consulted another Peter in 1991 before going into teaching, and again in 1999 too, and about becoming a head teacher. He noted that one of my skills is starting up new enterprises. Well, here I am, almost 30 years on, doing just that. His vision was to help people to discover and then be what God had made them to be. And because there isn't a parity of education assessment across the world, I've used this with Chinese children and with Middle Eastern children, and it's been so helpful to look at their history, see what they feel they've found enjoyable, satisfying or fulfilling, and this has wonderfully informed the choice of school and the A-levels and GCSEs that they would choose to do. So my third USP is about consulting for cultural literacy. And I thank God for the way that, that Ugandan experience gave me quite a bit of understanding about cultures and culture shock and reverse culture shock. So my third USP was developed with another Christian called Richard, who'd been looking at trends in the movement of international children's schools in the UK and on different cultures. And he urged me to do this course, so that, which is about understanding culture for business. It's really fun. So you can see that the people who are multi-active at the top are those who are, as it says in the middle there, warm, emotional, loquacious and impulsive. And I think we can all say, oh yes, the South Europeans and South Americans are very voluble, and they have lots of hand signs, and they're very passionate about the family, and there probably many of them have Catholic backgrounds. But then we also see that there are some Africans and some Middle Eastern peoples there as well, who are in that sort of red and purplish or orangish tone. The linear active are the people who basically go into a meeting, settle down and say, well, here's the contract, sign here. They're just businesslike, formal, not particularly relational, cool, factual, as it says there. So we feature, we are not as extreme as, or, right in the corner with Germany, Switzerland and Luxembourg. Interesting that we're on not where USA is either. But then on the bottom right, you can see the reactive people, and you would have done business perhaps with people in the Far East who tend to be rather enigmatic. I mean, they've obviously used very positive words here. We, in our understanding, explored some of the things other descriptors. We found it absolutely fascinating. They gave us some examples. Apparently in South Korea, it's quite customary for them to be extremely courteous, listen to everything, go through the whole contract, and then stand up and seem to have this sort of fake anger, um, and storm out, and it leaves you feeling crikey, what am I meant to do now? And then when they come back, you make concessions to accommodate the points that they've raised. And I think this was apparently came up many times, and the other people on the course also recognise that. So if I'm dealing with a Korean parent and I'm aware of that, it will help me to be much more patient, to talk it through more carefully. So I found this absolutely fascinating. And you can see how it's a matter of degree. And of course, these are stereotypical, or what they would call prototypical. And I know that I'm dealing with an individual client, an individual person, but it's still happy to have a framework of reference to refer to. And I think the way that Michael Gates, who's taken over the Richard Lewis model, said it's a bit like a ladder, that when you've got to where you want to be, you kick the ladder away, you don't need it anymore. But it's a tool that is very helpful. So I'm bringing this model to guardians, teachers of international pupils, and pupils coming to border schools and freshers. And my vision was to actually have a virtual summit. Because of lockdown, I couldn't run the courses that I was planning to do. So the virtual summit happened in June. Unfortunately, I had a number of problems with the technology, so I only had 24 attendees. But I'm going to promote this now from January, one a week. And you can see that these were the topics that I had with some brilliant people, many head teachers and so on. So I focused on 3 areas. The green was leadership. The second in orange was the curriculum. And the third in yellow was pastoral care. So I have, I'm in fact doing a talk for COBIS next week, looking at how culture affects a child's experience, and how we can help them to settle in and to really learn effectively in a British school, because British schools are so respected. I don't know if you know, but there are 7,000 British international schools across the world. And there are schools in the UK, independent schools, who are absolutely purposefully marketing to particular nationalities in order to enrich the school experience for everybody, because there are so many children coming into the country. But I'd also love to see how I can develop this next year, for helping state schools, which don't have any choice about the nationalities they take. But I think because we have so many children here from other countries, they need to be properly looked after, and we need to be aware of the nuances of their culture and how this may affect the way that we teach them, etc. So what are my lessons learned over this whole 40 years of my working life? When the virtual summit was so difficult and we just couldn't seem to make the software work, etc., this verse was given to me in Isaiah 50. Because the sovereign Lord helps me, I will not be disgraced. Therefore, I've set my face like flint, and I know I will not be put to shame. He who vindicates me is near. And this was a great encouragement. I was quite prepared to give up and just not run it. But I've always felt the business belonged to God, that it is the Lord's, it was a gift, and that I am a steward just working out how to be faithful in it, how to look after the families that come to me. and he's great, and he is my daily helper, and my pace setter and my vision provider. The second thing is that I've had a fantastic time with Andrew Cussons, because it's a long time since I was in business in London. This planning has been incredibly valuable and quite funny in a way. He asks us to do 3 business goals, but also to have 3 one personal goal, 1 kingdom goal, and 1 learning goal. So I put these on, and then during the course of the day, when we have these seminars, we then break the day down so that we can have our goals worked out through the whole of the 90 days, week by week. Now, of course, when the plan doesn't work, don't worry, pray and trust and reform. You know, as the virtual summit didn't work as well as I had hoped and planned, I am going to be now redoing it over the next few months from January, which is very exciting. So I've come to a few questions. I hope I'm not asking you to suck eggs. Oh yes, so this was my 90-day goal. My personal goal was to find a sweetheart, and I have, and I'm getting married in March. So that's very exciting. Groove is a piece of software. My business goals were broadcasting the talks from the virtual summit. I'm afraid it won't be the autumn term, it'll be spring term. My second business goal is to actually publish the talks, the 20 talks that I had. And the business goal 3 was to have 8 children who I would place in schools by Christmas. And it looks as though I'm on target for that, which is very exciting. So I had some questions if you'd like them. I could put these into the chat if that would be more helpful. What do you reckon? Are we going to have a formal chat, or would you just like to have a discussion?
How many of us are there? 1, 2.
We're about 9. Why don't we just stay in one group?
Yep. Yep. I think stay in one group then.
Okay. So
maybe, with 9 of us covering 5 points, we're going to need about an hour and a half, aren't we?
But why don't we choose one? Choose one.
Yeah, I mean, maybe could we invite everybody to pick one of those points and then comment on them?
Lovely. Why don't we have a minute of silence and or whatever to think about it?
Ponder them, yeah. Have we thought enough?
Yeah.
I feel like I should be a bit like a teacher myself, and so would anybody else like more time?
I recommend it. It's a wonderful job.
Time's up. Put your pencils down.
Yeah. Okay, who would like to go first? I'm very happy to, but okay, go on then, Richard.
I'll go first. So I really like question one, actually. What advice would you give to a Christian setting up a new business, particularly helpful post-COVID? As I sit here, I watch my wife loading up her coffee van, which is a business she started 3 weeks ago. This business has come entirely out of the fact that COVID happened. I don't think it would have crossed her path if COVID hadn't taken place. But actually, it's given her a whole new purpose in terms of what she's doing, and you can really see God in it. As we're week 3 of this now, and we're currently trading on the figures that have been set for 6 months' time, wow. And that's a real kind of blessing, because we didn't know if there was a marketplace for a coffee van in Rugby. It turns out there is, and ironically, we haven't gone any further than more than 3 miles from home yet, and we have a patch that is about 15 miles north to south, and she starts at 300 yards up the road and finishes it 2 miles away. Yes, it's hard work, but the delight that it's bringing her is great, and it's just one of those things that is kind of fallen in our laps, really. And so the advice I would give is follow God's calling, because it turned up on our drive one day and we looked at it and both of us just said, that's really good. And she's always wanted a coffee shop and I've always said no, and actually this is the answer to a lot of prayer. So the challenge, the answer is go for it. If you think it's right, do it. Don't sit there and go, I'm not sure. So yeah, that's my answer to question number 1. Go for it, because God will keep putting opportunities in front of you until you take it.
Anybody else for number 1? Maybe we'll go around number 1s and then number 2s, etc. Anybody else for number 1? I had also picked number 1, but is there anybody else?
I picked number 1 as well.
Okay. And we hadn't conversed. So. Would you like to go first, or shall I?
Yeah, mine's pretty simplistic, really. At the risk of sounding over simplistic, I think if I was talking to